All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to talk a little bit about something we call is your deployment in pants down mode, and I'll explain that more in a minute. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jason Rualt. I'm the CTO of Cloudvisory. We build hybrid multi-cloud security solutions, and obviously we support OpenStack and Kubernetes, which is big here. So, pants down mode. So, pants down mode is exposure, security exposure in particular. I used to work at Time Warner Cable and was responsible for the private cloud there, which was OpenStack based. And we had lots of security exposures because it was a self-service environment, and users often would just open up their security group rules, right? SSH open to the world. That's pants down mode, okay? There are other types of security exposures obviously as well. Do you have a secure configuration of OpenStack? Are there other ports that you're making available, network zones, things like that? So that's where that comes from. So just real quick, just talk about some of the challenges of the cloud, in particular for security challenges. It's a black box environment. You don't have great visibility into it, and that's one of the reasons that you end up in pants down mode a lot of times with the self-service capabilities. So how can you actually gain visibility? The next issue around misconfiguration goes hand in hand with the lack of visibility. People misconfigure all the time. Lots of security breaches have been have made companies infamous, like leaving their storage open to anonymous access, for example, their key value storage, things like that. There's also what I talked about, leaving things too open. A lot of times developers putting stuff in the cloud, they're trying to troubleshoot their application, so they just kind of open up the security group rules, right? Just to eliminate that as a problem. But then they get left open, and they actually propagates quite a bit in the environment because it's hard to track down sometimes. And then attacks themselves often go undetected and until it's too late, right? And so how can you actually alert and find these things, alert on them, and actually be able to respond to them quickly is a key point. And this is all coming about because of the self-service nature of the environment. Teams are becoming more agile. They can move more quickly, right, in the cloud environment, but it also causes some problems for other teams that are responsible for security, risk and compliance, and so forth. How can they maintain control without slowing that down? So where do you start? The first place you start is actually looking at the configuration of your environment. OpenStack's done a great job community-wise. They've coming up with recommendations and best practices around security. They actually have what's called a security checklist, which has been published at this URL right here. And it looks at things related to, is Keystone configured properly? Is TLS enabled? Is cinder block storage using TLS when Nova's talking to it, that type of thing, right? There's some example checks I pulled out. Here you can see it's looking at permissions on these configuration files and so forth. So there's about 45 checks. And so if you go through and just make sure that you're deploying and configured in that manner, you've done a good base level set on your environment, right? The one thing that it's important to note, though, is that compliance is not really, it's something that you need to do more than once, right? And to do it right, you're going to need to actually automate things. And we've actually, at Cloudvisory, have automated all these checks for you, as well as others, which I'll talk about. This is just an example of some of the automation we did on the OpenStack checks in a particular environment here. You get a quick view of your security posture from a configuration standpoint, and then you can continually run this because it's automated. And you can go back in time. You can go back at any point in time and look to see how has this environment changed. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? And most importantly, you can demonstrate that compliance to your auditors, right? Because that's what they want to see. It's great to have, to have automation to deploy your environment and make sure it's configured correctly. But if you're not going out there and proving compliance, your auditors aren't going to know that if things have changed or not. We've also provided tailored views into your compliance posture. So We have templated reports on these checks, and this is just an example of the OpenStack Security Guide checklist, just a snippet of it. You'd scroll through all those different categories. You'd see quickly how you're doing. You can give that to your auditor or whoever is interested in that. We offer, CIS. I showed some examples of other reports we have here, CIS reports, and then there's other types of things you can look at from a PCI and SOX perspective as well. This is an example Kubernetes report for looking at CIS checks. I think there's, it says 110 checks there. So it's pretty extensive what it's looking at. But beyond the configuration of your environment, you also want to be able to look for what the self-service users might be doing or doing wrong, right? So I talked about misconfigurations, the whole pants down mode thing, right? This is a capability you can go and look across all your security group rules in all your cloud environments. So you can be looking across many of them, as well as your data center environments, if that's what you have, a hybrid cloud. And we here are showing an example of just doing a quick filter and query across all those environments for port 22, direction inbound, protocol TCP, remote of any IP, okay? And we're coming back with, there's this little red number up there. I think it says 32 potential risks. But you can create these types of queries to quickly assess what's going on in your environment and you have any exposure or anything. Anybody remember the Memcache DDoS attack that happened to GitHub not too long ago? That was because port 112.1.1 UDP was open to the internet and they got DDoSed. If they would have had something like this to quickly query, they would have found that and been able to close it. Now, we offer the ability to not only create those ad hoc queries, but then you can actually configure them to continually run in your environment. In the background is the result of a check looking for SSH inbound on any port, where we found a number of workloads in the environment that had that. We have the ability to actually auto-notify owners of those workloads. We can discover VM ownership by talking directly to Keystone to understand who has membership on that project, as well as we can pull it off of metadata tags on the VMs and let the users know that they're in violation. We can also configure to auto-remediate. So as soon as you find that rule that's going against what you want to have in your environment, we can remove it. You can create custom guardrails and checks. This one down here is a check where we had a customer who is doing tagging on their VMs, and they wanted to be really consistent on how they tagged the VMs in the environment. They're putting like cost center tags in there and ownership information on all their VMs, but not all their users were doing it consistently. So they wanted to be able to have that as part of their compliance check to make sure that all the VMs were tagged correctly, the correct set of cost center rules, and if they found ones that weren't tagged correctly, they could alert and report on it, as well as they could remediate it and set the tag correctly through the tool based upon parent association of that VM, whether it was an Azure resource group or an OpenStack project, that type of thing. The next part of the puzzle is being able to have visibility into your environment. And we do that uniquely in a couple different ways. One is through being able to visualize your infrastructure through a UI like this, where you can actually drill down through your cloud provider. In this case, I have some of OpenStack expanded. The outside ring is the OpenStack provider. Inside that would be my OpenStack clusters. I just have one that I've opened. And then within that OpenStack cluster, you're listing your projects, and then you can drill down in your projects, and you can see your VMs, which have a W on them for workload. We're collecting the flow information between the workloads, and we're making that available in the UI. We know all the context around the workload as far as the metadata, where it resides in your cloud provider. We also understand the security group rules on those workloads, and we can actually orchestrate the provisioning of those security group rules based upon the context that you define for that workload. And here we actually are showing you flows, whether or not they're compliant or not with the defined policy. So the green flows are compliant, the red flows are non-compliant. We'll show block flows and so forth. So So automation and being able to have the visibility and then being able to have the kind of compliance assurance through the continuous reporting and alerting is what I'm trying to get across here to avoid pants down mode. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to come up and talk to me afterwards. We also have a booth downstairs in the exhibit area, booth C9. Again, the name's Cloudvisory. And thank you for your time.